Greetings, guys, gals, and everything else in between. This is me, Silas, coming back to record this after recording this entire piece because at the start I was like, oh, this is going to be a short thing. I found this thing from the Fatherless Generation at .wordpress.com, statistics, and I thought I was just going to read the statistics. It's going to be kind of a short thing. Read the statistics and be done. And I say that at the start of this, but it ended up being like an hour and 7 minutes or so of reading the stats, giving my reasoning to why I thought this is important, and when the video gets back into it, I'll get into the reasoning, and this one will be the one with my laying down of why I think this is going to be a series. This series will probably be updated when I get more statistics. I'll have other ones where I talk about that, but if you're interested in just the statistics, I think there's a British song, it sounds like a slang, just the statistics, show me the statistics. There will be links somewhere to where you can get just the stats and read them for yourselves, or me having a reading of just the stats without commentary. If you already find this to be valuable information that you want to know, and you don't mind me actually reading it with my commentary, you can jump in. There's a timestamp on the screen now, but it should be about 25 minutes from now when I lay down the reasoning of why I think this is important, make the case for it. Then I start reading the actual statistics, so you can get that here, or somewhere below, I'll give a timestamp of where the actual reading and commentary of the statistics from Fatherless Generation.wordpress.com starts. Now, with that intro out of the way, getting into the actual initial recording, and I was just low energy on the start, so excuse that, but I think the content is good and worth knowing. Hey, what's up? Silas here. This is just going to be a short reading of some statistics about fatherlessness. And this has been an issue that is occurring in some places in the world where there's a breakdown of the traditional family in that area. And I want to say traditional family in that area since we have different societies. It's the same Homo sapiens, but the Homo sapiens themselves, we're a sexually dimorphic species, whereas we've gotten to a situation where the male and the female, biological male and the females, they come together. That's defined by the biology, XX, XY. That's also defined by the sex cells that they have, the sizes of them, the value of them, and things like that. They come together, and then now there's male, female, then there's a man and the woman. That depends on the culture that they live in. That man and the woman, they kind of have different behaviors. That's the male and the female once they're no longer the boy and the girl. And the male and the female, once they're of an adult age, they're considered the man and the woman in that culture, in that environment that they're in. And then normally in that situation, those two of that species, of the Homo sapiens species, come together and reproduce and create boys and girls and things like that. And in that area, wherever they are, there's certain masculine and feminine behaviors that are taught and are learned from those children in different environments. Now, when they do that, they look at the adults who are around them, the adults that are around them, and learn these things from them. There's some things that they learn from teaching, of course, where it's like, this is something I'm directly telling you, this is how you should behave, this is something you should not do. You, as this biological being, this collection of organs that creates this organism, you would behave in a certain way. There's something kids pick up on certain things, whether or not you actually directly tell them. So there is some purpose and some reason why different societies have developed different sort of relationships between males and females. Now you look at other species. Some species are very heavily invested where the male spends a lot of time. There's some where the female just leaves the male with the kids. I think it was penguins is one of them. There's others where it's the male is just not even there. Then you have some like the male comes in with the lion and they come in and like, okay, the other male's gone, we're killing all the kids so the female can get back in estrus and we can reproduce this kind of place. Then there's some where there's like cuckoo birds, where the cuckoo bird is like, the cuckoo bird, now that one is the female bird, will take their egg and drop it off in the nest of an entirely different egg, entirely different bird, and then have that bird raise their egg. So in that one, both the male and the female is like, we're piecing out on you, kid. And some of these ones, when you have something like that, the kid is in a situation where I'm not quite sure which type of bird it is, but there's one bird where, since this is biologically known, that as an egg, it looks the same as the bird's nest that it's been put in. But as it gets older, the other bird starts to notice that this is not my kid, and it normally kicks that kid out. So that kid is normally in a certain way where it's supposed to evolve to actually be ready to actually live on its own, survive on its own, when it's directly kicked out of that nest. So it's a lot earlier. Then some animals have situations where when the animal is born itself, it's normally as effective to be able to fend for itself because of the environment that I just saw, like some what's it called? It's called like ovipar or something, or it's like ovi something. The ovi is like the egg type of thing. With rays, like this manta ray was the stingray was birthing four different pups, but they could swim to begin with. And a lot of ocean creatures, it's like once they're actually born out, if it's the birth and not eggs, they normally get to a situation where it's like, okay, they're just born out and then they can go out and actually do things, because if you're not able to do things immediately, you can get snatched up by a predator or something. Like the mom can't, or the mom and the father can't just sit there. But then now you have the ones with eggs, like of course with Finding Nemo, where you had those bunch of eggs and like the anemone. They're not doing the bit, it's just a really hard word. The sea anemone, where you have the father looking up, I mean the male looking for the female, and then you have like with clownfish, I think you have the thing where another extra thing with clownfish, they have their little gender fluidity, where where a clownfish will pretend to be a female and then swim closer to past the males that are mate guarding and get to the female that they can reproduce with, and they swim away and things. So there's all these interesting things that we see with male and females. And this is a biological thing that a lot of us in biology have. We are biological beings. We are animals. We are all earthlings here. Yes, humans might do some things that are more convoluted, but I don't think it's that complicated when you start figuring in how much that reproduction counts in these things. And I've talked about all these different things, saying male and female in a different kind of way here, saying man, woman, because there's a responsibility. What does a man lion do? If we say like we're gonna raise a kid, like the whole thing was like Mowgli. Was it Mowgli? Mowgli he was raised by animals in Jungle King. Then you have things like the Remus and Lupus, I think those are the names of him. The supposed founders of Rome. They were raised by wolves and things like this. You can't necessarily raise a human being to behave in those kind of ways. That wouldn't necessarily be considered a man or a woman if they're raised by animals. You see the feral kids and things like that. Then now you look at our closest cousins in nature and things like that. You look at the apes. You look at the way the great apes behave, and lesser so the monkeys and things like that. And you look at bonobo chimps versus the regular, like, continental chimps. Bonobo chimps are normally on one particular island, and they have their own male-female relations. They have the different sexual dimorphism. So we've studied this. People have studied things as human behavioral psychology, as evolutionary psychology. There's a lot of different studies into the different ways that biological creatures reproduce and have their familial type of structures. So nothing is 100% written in stone. You move to different human cultures in different areas, and those have normally developed different cultures to deal with different issues that were that existed in their evolutionary environment. And this is as a biological being, and also as an actual culture, as the social organism that we live within. So that preamble was pretty much just to set up the idea of this, where my contention is there's a purpose for familial structures that exist at different places. There's certain practical reasons why having a good representation of a man and a woman around you should be able to be a good environment for a child. Male and female, man, woman, they're complementary in many cases. One can do some things better, the other one can do some things better. There's a distribution of labor when you have two people, especially when you have two people with different abilities and different capabilities. I think that's something that creates a good environment. I've spoken about this before in a separate video, where some people say, oh no, all you need is just one strong parent and that's okay. A single parent is just great, they can do it. Well, if a single parent as an individual is a good person that can really raise a kid in a really good way, if that single parent finds another single human being that's also equally capable at doing things that they do and probably raising their own kid, like step by step, oh baby. Remember that show? It was like it was Patrick Duffy. I don't know, was Patrick Duffy's name in the show, or is that it's Patrick Duffy was the actor, and Suzanne Summers. It was like a TGIF show where they had kids in themselves, and they married each other and they came together in that kind of situation. So if you say like one parent can do well, then two parents, if you doubled that one parent, that would also be doing well, right? But now if you even had a situation where you say, okay, this one woman can represent and be the fatherly type of person, but if you just found someone who's already a father and she was not trying to be something she is not, that would be better. I mean, I think most people would kind of admit that. Two fathers. If two fathers is good, because one can be kind of more motherly, one can be kind of more fatherly. If two mothers is good, because one can be more motherly, one can be more fatherly. then why not just have the people be the genes and the biology and the thing that they already are? But we understand that even if you don't have that, even if you, for some reason, your parents both die, you get adopted into a family, it's still good to have those kind of responsibilities. If you're a child of a single parent, it's still good to have maybe the brother or if you're a single mom, have the brothers, have some uncles, have the grandfather, have just friends, male friends, other people, or have her be able to actually show you good examples of people. If you're a boy, if you're a son of that single mother, even if you're a girl and if you're a daughter of that single mother, it's good to see good, responsible males and good, upstanding, moral, ethical males and other ways so you can understand, look, you're going to be meeting some people who are like this. These are the people you should kind of gravitate to. These are the kind of people that you should avoid. Now, if you don't have that in your environment, I think you find certain things that are lacking. And there's a lot more I can say about this, but one of the primary reasons that I think I want to talk about this fatherlessness issue is there is a certain cheering of female single parenthood in the West. In the United States of America, I've seen it a lot. I've seen it more in the other parts of the West. It's not so much. I'm recording this from Nairobi, Kenya. I don't really see it that much being talked about. But even the strongest woman ever would do well with some help. Even if it's another help of another woman. If you want to say it's just all women and things like this, as I've said before. And even with this situation in the United States of America, with kids, they already have a lot of representation, a lot of interaction with females, a lot of time spent with girls growing up, a lot of time spent under the tutelage of women and ladies and things like this. Because you think about the K through 12 system in the United States of America, think about the daycare system the way it is right now, with a lot of people having both parents out of the house, or the single mom needs to be working in order to be able to get money for the kid and things like this, and no one to take care. So they put them in daycare. Look at the percentage of people who work in daycare. It's majority female. You look at the percentage of people who work in K through 12, it's like 95% female. And then you look at people doing after school type of activities, majority female also in that situation. Then they come home, they have the single mother. In many situations, if the single mother has more of an extended family, you have some places in more like inner city urban areas, you have a long history of this. So it's like the grandmother, a couple of aunties might be there that might have single parents and things like that, might be single parents as well. The mom, of course, is a single parent. So you have this entire generation. It's like, I was raised by my grandma. So that is still something that is maybe similar to something that I took this women in philosophy course when I was in college. And I asked the teacher, we were talking about, there was all this sexism and things like this from Victorian times. Then I was like, wait, well, you said that the kids were being taught by governesses and things like this. The mother was was teaching the kids until the boy was 13. The man wouldn't really spend that much time with him unless it was just a dinner table. That was the only time. So it's like, okay, so you're talking about there was all this sexism in society, this misogyny that you're saying was there, but it was the mom and the governesses and the cooks and the other women that were teaching the kids. They were teaching the girl to be subservient, and they were teaching the man to like hate the boy to hate the women. Is that what you're trying to say? And I don't recall really getting a concise answer to that. And that's one of the things. Some people are very loose on the definition of what sexism is and the definition of what misogyny is. To me, sexism is simply saying that this individual is not as good as or is better at doing X due to the simple fact that they are XX or XY, and I'm going to actually favor this person over that person. That other person is worse at doing this or better at doing this, so I'm not going to choose them because of XX or XY. That's it for sexism. Misogyny, now that would be a thing where for some irrational reason, for just inexplicable reasons, I'm not going to be able to define to you why I prefer this person over that person, but this is something about femaleness, something about maleness that's going to make me hate them. It's going to make me go out of my time. And when I'm talking about misogyny, hate, not just like, oh man, this is like literally the worst day of my life. Like, oh my God, like I can't believe. No, I'm talking about hate. Like I don't want to deal with this person. I don't want to talk to these people. If I don't have to, I'm just not going to be around these people. So that's the type of thing that I'm talking about. Yes, some people have preferences for hanging out with women, hanging out with men. Some people have preferences for being around certain type of personalities and things like this. And with a sexually dimorphic species, there are going to be certain things that go towards masculine and feminine that are going to be embodied by men and women, by boys and girls who are male male and female, that's going to make people lean towards one side. Some people will be more friends with one group of people. Some people are more friends with another group of people. I remember being a kid here in Kenya, and I left when I was 10, 11. And here at that time, kids are just kids. You just kind of played together. It's like all the boys and the girls, everyone cuts their hair short, or some of them had started growing their hair at that time. But in the playground, between school, between classes, it was just everybody playing together. Those lines were not delineated as much. Then I got to the United States of America, and that was a fifth grade around there. And there was already those delineations. There was like the cooties, and like the man and the girl is supposed to be here, and the boys are supposed to be there, like that kind of different kind of things where you're not really, it's like your friend, like you're friends with this person. You can't be friends with the girl, or you can't, like that kind of situation, and that was kind of alien to me. And that was also in an area where there was people coming in from many different cultures and things like this. It was the suburbs of Washington, D.C. So there was people coming in from different cultures, different locations and things like that. First generation Americans, international organizations, embassies and things like that. Then the Americans themselves, some of them were coming from different parts of the country to work in the governmental and other kind of organizations in there. So there was an interesting mix of people. And then we're starting to discover different things with relationships and things like this. And a lot of the people were discovering themselves in different ways and mingling the different ideas that they had and they were coming up with in school. And then I saw a lot of the people after kind of revert back to their culture, to their historical, to what their parents were doing when it came down to marrying. A lot of the people might have dated across races, across cultures in school, but then when it came to actually getting into college, finally marrying people, a lot of people seem to marry within their race, within their culture, using the same kind of customs. And I think that's in part because once it gets to the point of making that decision, as kids, we're not seeing our parents date. Some of the parents never dated to begin with. Some of the parents had organized marriages and many other limited type of things. So you never really got to see that. So you're figuring that on your own yourself. But then when it comes down to marriage, I think people defaulted to the marriage environment that they were growing up, that were raised in, and that was, for many of these people, in their culture, in a certain way. I'm trying now to think, like, how many people whose parents were divorced also themselves were divorced. That would be interesting to kind of look into. But there's certain things that are learned. Now, there's something in the United States of America, and I'm finally going to get to the actual reading here, where there is a big upping, a pedestalizing of just women in general, and women are amazing in general. Just you're just more useful. From a simple biological, as I started this with, the simple biological reality. If you have 50 males and 50 females in a prehistorical tribe, and for some reason, maybe it's a fight, maybe it's some kind of disease comes in, and 49 of those males die, and 50 of those females are left alive, in a couple of generations, that tribe will be back to its original size of 100 people. If you have the inverse, where you have 49 of the females die, and 50 of the males stay alive, within a few generations, probably within one generation, that tribe will be done. That's just a basic of biology. And to begin with, we are animals. We are biological creatures. We are genes driving machines that are trying to reproduce those genes. That's what we are at the basic level of all these things. Then we add some convoluted things above that in order to get to that. Some of the things are a little more complicated, but it shouldn't be confusing once you understand that underlying reality of the human organisms, of the organisms that we are, of the earthlings that we are. And it's a good way to look at other animals and see, okay, this works for this animal, but you can understand why living like a lion would not necessarily work for whales. Living like a whale would not necessarily work for flies. Living like a fly would not necessarily work for trees. Like living like a tree would not necessarily work for, let's say, penguins. So these are the different realities that we have, and we have to understand that those are some things. So if you find that a certain culture, a certain society has been organizing itself in a certain way, chances are, if you look at, okay, there's challenges for the female here. Chances are, if you look, you'll see there's also challenges for the male. There's very few societies that end up existing longer that really put down one of the sides, male or female, a lot more than the other side. Yes, you can have someone that's super skewed, where it's like, oh, the mother of certain fish, like praying mantis, some of them eat the mate. That's pretty low. There's very few, just because of the biology general thing, where you have like the mother sacrifice their actual body in order to have the kids live again. Although sometimes you'll see somebody do that, like, I'd rather have my kid live than me die in the birth and the process. Humans have done massive amount of work to reduce the mortality rate in developed countries, because that was one of the primary challenges. The primary challenge for the female was gestating and giving birth, or just giving the birth. That was the primary challenge for most biological beings. That's how it's been, because they're the ones who are carrying the bigger sex cells and things like that. That's how you define male, female in many kind of cases. And this ramble is finally getting towards the end, and I'm going to get to the actual content. And then you have some fish, I think, where it's like there's some deep sea fish where the male actually grafts themselves onto the female, and then after he's impregnated the female, like he gets eaten into, absorbed into the body, and that body goes to feed the kid. And that's the risk the male takes. And I think now we've gotten to the point where in some societies we get to the point where people are saying man going their own way. MGTOW is one of the groups that say you can't even deal with women. Like the whole relationship situation in the United States of America in the West is too dangerous for males. Like you're going to get the woman can cheat on you, have a kid from somebody else, you still have to pay for the kid, or the woman can just divorce you at any time. I think there's still ways to go beyond that. Like you look at the married situation, you look at the divorce situation, and there's still majority of the people still stay together. And yes, you can say if they thought it was viable to get divorced, they would go higher. You can say in the past that maybe women just didn't realize it was viable to get divorced, so they would have gotten divorced in the past, but now they haven't. So this is something with female nature. I don't necessarily think it's like that. I think it's more nurture in here, where there's certain behavioral things, there's certain structural things in society that are being broken up. As I mentioned with the school and things like that, people coming in from different cultures, and that is also in the grander culture, in the grander society. You have a lot of people coming from different places. People aren't as integrated. The support systems aren't really as structured. People aren't really as informed about what they're getting into before they actually get into that. Because in some societies, like, yes, you're going to live in this kind of male-female relationship because the rest of the people in your society will live in that male-female relationship, and you'll have support systems set up in that male-female relationship as you're raising kids. Here you'll have that, but you'll be like, okay, the woman's supposed to do all these things, but everybody else in that society, the women or many other people in that society are doing other things. So you don't really have that ability to have a group of women being able to have the conversations about the similar things that they're doing. The groups of men are out there doing different things. So there's different kinds of situations like, oh, why is your wife doing this? Is your wife letting you do this? And then why is your man doing this to you? So there's this kind of mixture of things, and I think that choice and changes are leading to different kind of familial structures, and I think that's okay. We're evolving to a different kind of human being, a different kind of organism, different kind of human organism, human societal organism, where there's more variety in how to structure these things. But just getting to the final end here, the main thing I'm talking about here is the fatherlessness. Why do we have certain societies that big up single motherhood specifically, but really don't talk about the lack of fatherhood? We have the societies where we say, yes, the woman can do anything. Some kid ends up being successful. Some kid ends up playing football and being successful and think, oh, the kid of a single mother. Look, another single mother did this. Some kid ends up starting a business. I mean, yes, another single mother did this. Like I put my single mother did all these things. There's something, and it's specifically, it seems to be majority, primarily being focused on the black community in the United States of America. It's not an African issue. It's not an Asian issue. It's not an Oriental issue. It's, to the lesser extent, a white in the United States of America issue, because there are some people in some areas in certain places that have those, but primarily it seems to be something in the black community in the United States of America, American descendants of slaves. They have a big uptick in that, and there's this kind of praising of single motherhood. It's gone now more to some more middle-class white Americans and things like this who are getting a lot older and like, I'm just going to just have an adopt a kid. I'm just going to have a kid in vitro and just raise the kid myself. So there is something that's actually being brought up in that situation. Or yeah, you're not happy with this guy, you're just kind of bored and things. Yeah, just divorce him and you can still get some money from this person who will have the child protective services, the whole like civil like family courts and things like that will rule towards you and will be able to get money to you, will be able to get social services. So there's more, because as being a single mother, it's not really that bad for the kid. In fact, it might even be better for the kid. But when it comes down to it, you look at the negative outcomes of people who didn't have fathers. It doesn't mean, in some of these stats I'm going to be reading, it doesn't mean that everybody who's raised without a father will do this. But it's really frightening how many people have these negative outcomes that were raised without a father. And I think part of that is, as I said from the start, we live in a society. We live in a society. And it's a situation where you're going to be dealing with other human animals in the area that you're in. And if you don't start getting a good idea of the variety of how to be a responsible, ethical, moral version of this sort of adult, if you're a boy, of a man in that area, in masculine ways, how the masculine ways of behaving in that place and not behaving, and then as a female, if you don't have the ability to see, as a girl, if you don't have the ability to see, this is what a good man is like, this is what a good man should do, this is what a good man should not do, if you don't get to see that kind of thing growing up, you're going to be at a bigger handicap than the people who've seen the variations of it. I think that's just something that you can agree on. If you don't have more good responsibilities, because someone could say if somebody's raised without any kids, has no good actual representation, and we talk about this, we need more women represented. We need more people of our race represented. We need more people of the identity group that I identify as represented. We need good representation of it in order to inspire these kids, inspire the different generations. Some people saying adults. Someone would be like a 45-year-old. I need to see a black actor playing this character, and then that inspires me. A black kid playing a character that inspires you somehow. So people understand that aspect of it. But then when you just come out and say, okay, yes, you're just saying people X need a good representation of Y, of them, someone who's like X doing Y in order for them to grow up to be a successful Z, then how come you don't really apply this to say, a man, a boy, would require a good example of a father, a male, in their environment in order to grow up to be a good man, or good, to be act in a good masculine way. No, in that one they say, no, you can just have a mother do that. You can have a single mother do that. They're going to be good enough at that. You don't need a man in that environment. And I think we're seeing the result of this. And this is the result of this. I think it's going to be short. I think I'm going to go back to the start and say it's not short and record that part. But right now I'm just going to get into the statistics. And this is from the Fatherless Generation at wordpress.com. You'll be able to find links to this. And there's other locations. I might update this when I find other places with more stats. Now this is just some statistics that they have here. So statistics. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes, and this is from the U.S. Department of Health census, 5 times the average. 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes, 32 times the above average. 85% of all children who show behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes, 20 times the average. This is from the Centers for Disease Control. 80% of the, and I'm not going to say this word because I know this pings some things on certain places that I'm going to be posting this, and I want this to reach as many people as possible, is the people who do the worst sorts of sexual assault that you can think of, the aggravated ones. 80% of those people with anger problems come from fatherless homes, 14 times the average. Justice and Behavior, Volume 14, page 403 to 26. Now, I don't know what they're saying, the anger problems. Maybe they're saying there's different levels of this horrible attack. Some of them are more of opportunities. Some of them are more just sneaking into them. Some of them, they lash out and do it in times of anger. I think that's what they mean with that specification. Then 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. That's 9 times the average. That's from National Principals Association report. Then father factor in education. Now, I have some issues with the schooling indoctrination complex, as I call it, big indoctrination, big schooling, and that could be part of why this happens. But as you mentioned, there's already 95% of the schooling in most of these K through 12 will be actually women teaching, ladies, sometimes young ladies, women teaching. We've seen a lot of situations where now that term I was talking about before with the anger, you don't really have it treated when a female older teacher has relations with a younger male boy, a student. We often see, oh, where was this teacher and how was this singing? These kind of idiotic kind of inanities that are said. And yes, males and females are different, boys and girls are different. But when it comes to the development of a mind and the power dynamics that are going on in that, I think it still should be considered this level of assault, but it is not treated that way. And I think that's one of the inherent things that we know. Inherently, we don't treat men and women the same. We don't treat males and females the same. And we shouldn't, because males and females aren't the same. If everything that was good for the goose was good for the gander, then we would all be geese. But we aren't. We're a sexually dimorphic species. And masculine, feminine, man, women have different responsibilities and expectations in societies. Okay, so the father factor in education. Fatherless children are twice as likely to drop out of school. Children with fathers who are involved are 40% less likely to repeat a grade in school. Children with fathers who are involved are 70% less likely to drop out of school. Children with fathers who are involved are more likely to get A's in school. Children with fathers who are involved are more likely to enjoy school and engage in extracurricular activities. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily a positive thing, as I have an entire series about Cracks in the Ivory Tower that talks about post-grad, that's college and farther, but also talks about the education system in general. There might be some things beyond that. And then 75% of all adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes. 10 times the average. Okay. Now, father factor in drug and alcohol abuse. And father factor in drug and alcohol abuse. Researchers at Columbia University found that children living in two-parent households with a poor relationship with their fathers are 68% more likely to smoke, drink, or use drugs compared to all teens in two-parent households. Teens in single-mother households are at a 30% higher risk than those in a two-parent household. And then some stats here. 70% of youths in state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes. 9 times the average. U.S. Department of Justice, September 1988. 85% of all youths in prison come from fatherless homes. 20 times the average. And this is Fulton County, Georgia, Texas Department of Correction. Now, some people might say, okay, it's not that negative to drink. It's not that negative to do certain drugs. It's okay. People may have self-medication. I personally, I didn't start drinking or doing anything else until I was done with high school. But then I had some different issues with that. I've ever since quit. I haven't smoked cigarettes or drunk anything in, I think 5 years now. But even when I started, I wasn't doing it that much. It was like I would take some months off and then get back in as playing football. So there's different reasons to be doing these things. But I think they're also talking about the abusing of these things for different reasons. And there's different reasons people are going to be doing it. Different levels, of course, they're going to be doing these things at, and in different kind of risk factors. I knew some people who were, again, I'm not saying any names, but I had some people who were like, okay, in high school, they were like, oh yeah, they would have parties and their parents would be at home. I don't know if this was a child of a single mother, but I know the mother would be home. I remember at least hearing the mom would be home as the kids were drinking and things like this. They're kind of like, I don't know. But then you have like some European places where it's like, okay, it's more in the European culture. I think in most countries in Europe, the drinking age is like 14. So you have them drinking at a younger age. This is one funny meme where it's like, okay, like me coming out from drinking at like 30, and it's like a 14-year-old has also been drinking for like a couple of years. So there's this kind of thing, a European 14-year-old. So they have that kind of thing where that's something that could be societal, that could change. Some people seem to just have that as just something that they do. They never get to the abuse things. And some culture, drug abuse is a lot higher. And even though there's a lot more restrictions on it. So that necessarily might not be 100% on this. There could be other factors that go into this as well. And I think it's a good point that they said here, a children living in two-parent household with a poor relationship. Just because somebody is present does not necessarily mean it's healthy. And we know this in the actual relationships that we also take on. And this is something that is unfortunate, where if you have that poor relationship and you're exposed to this poor relationship between your father and your mother, at least the people who are your male and female guardians and man and women guardians, the people you're looking up to, you might also try to emulate those negative relationships and be attracted to them and think, oh, this is how you raise a kid, because I was a kid raised in this environment and I didn't die. So if I find someone like this, I'll also be able to raise a kid that doesn't die. That's the thing that you learn to do in that kind of way. So that could be something. So it's not just having the poor relationship, but even when you're together, you can have negative effects by just having the poor relationship. And I think that will come up again also later down here. Father factor in incarceration. Even after controlling for income, youths in father-absent households still had significantly higher odds of incarceration than those in mother-father families. Youths who never had a father in the household experienced the highest odds. A 2002 Department of Justice survey with 7,000 inmates revealed that 39% of jail inmates lived in mother-only households. Approximately 46% of jail inmates in 2002 had a previously incarcerated family member. 1/5 experienced a father in prison or jail. Now, this is tough. This is something that I recently heard somebody comment on and talk about, how they were hearing about somebody who I think was working in prisons or something, but just was observing some of these and was saying that, unfortunately, with the incarceration rates for some black males, this is really an unfortunate situation. The first time they really get to spend time, extended amount of time, sitting down with a man, with an older male that's lived in their culture, in their community, that can give them some kind of input on how it is being a full-on adult age male in that area, is when they get imprisoned. When they go past the juvie and they're put in actual jail, now they're actually in the cells, and they got those older men who they can now hear stories about how to live. that is a horrible thing. Where some of these people have that stability, and they say, okay, what's it say, like 3 meals in a cot, that type of thing. Where it's like now they have a steady amount of actual. They know at this time I'm going to be able to get food, and then I have to look every time I know that my location to sleep is going to be in this kind of place. I'm going to be able to get in. I don't have to wait for like somebody to let me in. I don't have to understand are we going to get kicked out. Is there going to be power? Like that kind of regiment type of life that a lot of creatures, biological beings, earthlings, learn from in a younger age. The human beings, part of the reason, I don't think I mentioned this, should have mentioned it before, part of the reason we don't really have that way of actually just existing and being out, just walking and fending for ourselves when we just jump out of the womb, is in part our head takes time to develop. Our brains are massive. So it takes time for that to develop. If our brains developed more to get to the point where we could fend for ourselves, we would not be able to get out of the birth canal. So we need to come out of the birth canal, and we are an organism is developed to actually have some guidance of an adult being, more capable being, for the first couple of years before we can fend for ourselves. So that is part of it. So when you get to that kind of environment, and as you're fending for yourselves, as you're learning these things, in that environment, you're already learning these things. You're picking these things up. And it's a lot easier to pick these things up when you have some level of regimentation, some level of actual the confidence that what happened today will happen tomorrow and again can happen again the day after. As long as I do X, Y, Z, ABC is going to occur in a certain way. That kind of consistency, that kind of stability is something that does actually help children. That kind of way to like ask questions. Why do I do this? And then, oh, you do this because this happens and then this happens. And you start learning that you don't have to ask that question anymore. Then you go on to learn different things and you start building on those things. That's something that I think is very lost when you don't have them. That's why I'm saying it's a good positive thing to have, at least have the male and the female. Even if it's like, yeah, at least I can learn that this is not how I'm going to behave. But if you just don't have somebody there, if that person isn't present at all, that's something that I think brings different kind of situations and different kind of questions. And a lot of people right now are like, yes, we are against like the historical whiteness and things like this, Victorian times when there was like a negative society. Look at how those families were raised in that time. And you look at current year, the families that are also being raised in that kind of way. And the black community is a lot like what some of these Victorian kind of things were. Even when it comes down to the aspect of like the Victorian, the fathers were kind of, it was okay for you to go out and have prostitutes and have concubines and not concubines. It wasn't called concubines back then, but it was okay to have like different like dalliances of these women of the night and things. It was just like a common thing. You have these people on the side. There's little side pieces and things like that. Sometimes you had multiple families and things like this. That was something that was Victorian times that people looked down on. Like, look at those stupid white people with those negative type of things coming from that time. And then now when it's happening in the black community, oh no, that's just black culture. That's just how they are. This is the strong white. No. We don't need that. We don't need that at all. Okay, so next section, father factor in crime. A study in 109 juvenile offenders indicated that family structure significantly predicts delinquency. Adolescents, particularly boys in single-parent families were at higher risk of status, property, and person delinquencies. What is a status delinquency? Okay, pause to check here at the legaldictionary.net. Status offenses. In juvenile delinquency, a status offense is an act where it's only illegal because the offender is a minor. Now, this will be something like running away from home, truancy, violating local curfew, underage smoking, underage drinking, ungovernability, or being beyond parental control. Now, that's because of the status of the person. So if you can't run away from home, technically, if you're just an adult. If you're just like a 40-year-old and you're just like, you're living in this place, and then you just run away. Let's say it's your home, you've paid it up and things like that, and you just leave, I don't think you'll be considered to be as somebody can't call. I guess if it's like a missing persons report, but if you just leave and you just tell them, okay, I'm going somewhere else, you just abandon the house, I don't think it's necessarily considered a negative thing if you don't have any bills to pay. There would be a crime if there's like bills to pay and things like this. But let's say you're a woman and you're living with this man and you're just like, okay, this person, I don't really care about this person that much anymore. They bore me. I'm not excited anymore. And you just leave. It's technically not a crime. But then this situation, they say, okay, just leaving from as a child, just abandoning their parental guidance, the parental guardians, guarantors, and things like that who have authority over them, if they just abandon them, that is considered something negative. That's a crime. But I think they should be the inverse as well. And it seems to be held towards certain males predominantly. And I think now this is kind of increasing where now that women are being told to pay child support, at least alimony in some situation. But people say, it's manimony, vacuous. No. This is what the child code, this is what the civil court says. supposed equality, which is only a term that exists in mathematics, even if it was desirable. If you want that, then you should have women paying that as well, especially now that they're supposedly earning more and as much as men. That's what happens. But you have the situation, it should be a crime if you just abandon your kid. That should be a thing too. But then you have the different things where you can give birth to a kid, and in many places, safe haven law, where you can just leave the kid at a certain location. Some places they have like actual boxes. You can just put these kids in this box like on a building. It's not just like a box like an actual box inside the street, but it's like a box built into like a building. So you just kind of open it, you put it in there, and then there's people in the back. It's like fire stations or some kind of clinics or things like that, where there's people in the back checking like every 5 minutes. There could be a bell in the box, so you put in the kid, and then the kid is taken and given up for adoption. That's one of the options. But then, of course, for many men, if you have many men, wish death upon me. Like 50 Cent song. But you have the situation where if you leave, if you have intercourse with a woman and you leave and the kid is born, you still have to pay the kid because you're being held accountable for paying for that kid. But then I don't know how much it happens, and of course it doesn't happen as much when like the woman just leaves. But I think there should be some kind of aspect in there. Should it be? What do you think about that? If the kid can be held as a crime, status crime for that, so that status crime is depending on their age and their minor. Now that status crime, how about depending on their status as a parent, as somebody that has given birth, as somebody that has a dependent? They should be, I think it doesn't make some kind of sense to consider that to be one of the things that are in there. And that was a bit of an aside. Now let's get back to the actual statistics of here. So with the status, property, and person delinquencies. So moreover, students attending schools with a higher proportion of children of single parents are also at risk. A study of 13,986 women in prison showed that more than half grew up without their father. 42% grew up in single mother household, and 16% lived with neither parent. And then it's a rough situation. So this also happens with women. This is the first time I've seen the stat with the women, and it's normally focused more on the men in this situation. And of course, this is more an American-centric thing. As I said, I will update this series if I find more information about this in the United States of America that's not included here. And I'll also update it if I start finding statistics from other cultures and other societies to kind of see if this kind of maps out. And that is depending on their familial structures in those areas as well. Yeah. So now this is one of the tougher situations that this is one of the things that kind of it struck me to actually really realize this. Now, with this on father factor and child abuse. Now, there's going to be certain things that we're going to talk about here. Of course, this is adult mentality required. This whole thing has been with that, but I think this one will even higher so will now trigger some things in some people coming to understand what this is. Now, some cultures and some societies, of course, are not that open into like the peaceful parenting. Even here in Nairobi, Kenya, I'm seeing some people start talking about peaceful parenting, and I personally am a big advocate for it, and I think that is part of what will ensure the continued human flourishing, lead to actual world peace and that kind of situation. Have us be Solarians traveling around the universe and our first our solar system, then our galaxy, then our universe, by having a way where we actually respect the human beings that we are creating as actual fellow organisms that are deserving of respect and being themselves whole, not being violated, not using force upon them, because they learn these things. These are learned behaviors that you have. The abandonment that people get in some situations, not all abuse is just hitting somebody and physically doing it. There's a wide range of this. There's another thing. In adults, they're like, okay, you trigger words, you say these things to me, and they understand those kind of different levels of abuse, and they say that. But then when it comes to children, they're like, no, you can yell at a kid. Like, if I yell at you as an adult, don't you consider that abusive? Yeah. But if you do it to a kid, that's what you got to do to raise them. What? If I just all of a sudden just abandon and leave you, like I ghost you, you call me and you're like, all right, you were supposed to hang out, and then like, you think you're excited to hang out with me, and then I just all of a sudden just stop talking to you. Is that abusive? Yeah. Then I say, okay, if you do that to a kid, if you're just hanging out with a kid and all of a sudden you just drop them off somewhere else, you just leave. The kid doesn't really understand where you've gone. Is that abusive? No. You mean that's socialization? They're going to have to learn how to do. No. There's different things. We hold these kids to lower standards than we do to our fellow human beings, and that's a horrible thing. And I think the world is getting better in that situation. But here, I think it might trigger some things with some people and some things in different kind of ways. But there's something here that really happens. There's some things we're going to be talking about in this section with father factor and child abuse that is rather tough to kind of think of. And it kind of makes sense for foreshadowing. It's a bit kind of like what happens with the lions, but not, and even sometimes as bad as what the lions do, but sometimes worse in a different kind of human way in how pernicious the damage by these actions normally happen as they go on. Okay, so father factor in child abuse. Compared to living with both parents, living in a single parent home doubles the risk that a child will suffer physical, emotional, and or educational neglect. The overall rate of child abuse and neglect in single parent households is 27.3 children per 1,000, whereas the rate of overall maltreatment in two parent households is 15.5 per 1,000. That's almost double, as you can see from these stats. And again, this is depending on the reporting, how many people will truly report the levels of abuse. I think you'll find that in both of these cases, the numbers are probably a bit higher, at least a bit higher. Daughters of single parents without a father involved are 53% more likely to marry as teenagers, 711% more likely to have children as teenagers, 164% more likely to have premarital births, and 92% more likely to get divorced themselves. Now, with some of these stats, as I mentioned before, it's just picking the wrong kind of person, not being able to understand who the person who might be more healthy for you to be with is at those times, not being able to understand certain things. Then if the female is out there without the man, maybe the boys will be more, the young men will be more like thinking, I can just come in here and do this without having the threat, or the whole thing like shotgun marriage, and hey, all this thing. Okay, so there's these things to consider. There's a lot of different things to consider just with that one. And again, you're talking about do people look at divorce in the same way? Is it a situation where maybe the father is giving you a negative thing to say, oh, you have to, this is an organized marriage? And again, this is American centric. So you have certain societies where it's like, okay, we've paid the dowry, and dowry is when the family of the bride pays the family of the groom in order to have the marriage happen. So there's okay, we've paid them already, so this guy comes to us, so we've paid for this guy to come and be married here, so you can't just like divorce. So there's different pressures if you have that kind of society. Some cultures, like most of the tribes here in Kenya, they pay a bride price, where the man's family, the groom's family, has to pay the bride's family in order to kind of have the bride come in. So they say, okay, we already paid, they already paid us, so you can't just leave. So there's that kind of extra pressures that might come from having the parents in that situation. That's why I'd also like to look and see how does that even work when you have these kind of different relationships? If somebody in those societies, divorce rate is probably lower, so it'd be like, instead of single parent, it'd be more like widows and widowers and things like that. When one the person has died, what are the relationships with that? If anybody knows of statistics like that and you're listening to this, please let me know in the comment section. I might go check them out. Okay, so back to reading this. Adolescent girls raised in a two-parent household with involved fathers are significantly less likely to be sexually active than girls raised without involved fathers. There's something here again with biology. There is actually a thing that's been shown that certain familial household dynamics, if a father isn't present, lead to certain biological developments in girls at earlier ages. And this is again due to the biological environment that we have evolved in. If there's a situation where it seems like there's not that many males around as the child is growing up, there's a good chance there's wars going on, there's some kind of struggle going on, and then the biology will say, okay, we need to get to the point of reproducing faster in order to have more of our genes go on. Whereas if it's more like the father's around, the male's around, there's some notification being sent, some signaling being sent that, okay, there's comfort, you can take your time, and you'll be able to live longer and things like this. These are actual practicalities. I'll try to find the actual location where this study was done, because it's something that I've heard before. I think when I was reading the time I was reading a lot of evolutionary psychology books. This might have been the moral animal, might have been the selfish gene, but it's been something that in a lot of Evo Psych and human behavioral psychology, there's a lot of explanation of why this actually happens. Okay, so now into some of the actual statistics. 43% of U.S. children live without their father, U.S. Department of Census. 90% of homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. U.S. DHHS Bureau and Bureau of Census. 90%. 80% of those, again, who are those people who commit those grievous physical assaults, sexual assaults on people, who are motivated with displaced anger, come from fatherless homes. And this is from Criminal Justice Behavior, Volume 14, and this is pages 403 to 26. Again, that was written in 1978. I'm sure there might be updated information on this. 71% of pregnant teenagers lack a father. That's U.S. Department of Health and Human Services press release from Friday, March 26, 1999. See, some of these are rather old, so I'm sure there's a lot of newer stats that I might update this soon. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. Then USDHHS, Bureau of the Census. 85% of children who exhibit behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes, Center for Disease Control. 90% of adolescents, repeat arsonists, live with only their mother. Ray Herbert, Dowsing the Kindlers, Psychology Today, January 1985, page 28. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. National Principals Association report on the state of high schools. 75% of adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes. Rainbow for all God's children. 70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions have no father. U.S. Department of Justice Special Report, September 1988. 85% of youths in prison grew up in fatherless homes. Fulton County, Georgia Jail Populations, Texas Department of Corrections in 1992. Fatherless boys and girls are twice as likely to drop out of high school, twice as likely to end up in jail, 4 times more likely to need help for emotional or behavioral problems. USDHHS news release March 26 of 1999. As I mentioned, these are things that are relatively old, and this is information that's been known. You have the CDC making different kind of things, proclamations that we have a pandemic of this, we have an epidemic of this, we need to do this to stop that. And then you see certain things where the actual harm rate of these things, the percentage of people who are having these negative outcomes, who have this particular thing of lack of a responsible father in their life, seems to be rather high. Now, this is talking about fatherlessness. This is not talking about single motherness. So there is something that's lacking, because this is a lack of something. There's a lack of something that cannot just be overcome by one person. It's stressful enough. There's a lot of effort enough to be able to raise a child, one child with 2 parents, 2 adult parents. Now, if it's multiple children, and unfortunately what you see in many of these situations, you have these high numbers of single parented, where it's like, oh, the number of single parents is people, kids. You'll see the number of single parents hasn't grown as high as the number of kids growing up in single-parent households. Because I think in the past, if you were a single parent, the chances are you would not have more kids. You just wouldn't have the structure and support system to have. You would just struggle as much as possible with that one kid that you had, or those 2 kids that you had if your husband left, or if your wife left you. You would keep that kind of level. And now, of course, in this one, it's more easy for the woman to have more children by themselves. The man would require somebody else. They'd have to be a single parent and then have to find another woman who is willing to have kids with them, and then leave him again and leave him with the kids. And you find that less likely. But you have this situation where I think in the past, you didn't really have the ability to have that. And I think you'll see this in other countries where there are single mothers. You won't really find a situation like this is a single mother and she's got like 5 or 6 kids from like 3 or 4 different guys. You don't really find that in other countries. In other countries, and in the past, it was like, okay, if you're a single mother and you had that one kid, you're just struggling with that one kid. But you'll have a situation now in certain environments, people have multiple kids because you're getting different kind of services coming in, and you're having that kind of situation. I mean, I have actually seen, which I think were true, real, women saying, let's have more kids in order to get more government money, more filthy lucre. There's this thing called the welfare trap, where it gets to a situation where a single mother of like 5 kids is getting enough in child tax credits, getting enough services given to them, getting enough use of other general services that they have access to, where in order for them to actually be able to provide as much resource-wise for that family, they would have to earn something like $65,000 before they match the amount of income coming in to supply and actually purchase those services in the market outside of using the government social public sector services. So you have that situation where after you've had 2 kids, you understand you don't really have that much time to take care of them. You might as well have some more because you're going to keep getting more money by them, but then you're not going to have the time to go out there and earn more than $20,000 a year, maybe $25,000 a year. And so that struggle kind of happens and traps people in this environment. So there's something you should definitely check with that, with the welfare trap. I'll try to leave some links to the statistics about that somewhere here. Now, another thing that wasn't mentioned here that I talked about before with the lion type of thing that happens is this is not going to be too surprising to you. If you rent something chances are you're not going to treat it in the same way. Look at the way somebody on average would treat a car that they rented, a home that they rented versus a car that they bought and owned, a car that they built themselves versus a home that they built and owned, or a home that they built themselves. I think you'll have a different relationship with that when you have possession and ownership over something than not. This is something that in my old younger self, I was like, why would I marry a single mother or someone who's had a kid? Like, I'm like, that's a constant reminder that this person has had intercourse, relations with somebody else. This kid looks like that other person and things like that. Adopting is different, I think, than having just somebody who's like, this is a constant reminder, somebody who is someone else. Then you have the added ability in this situation where, okay, this person has come in, and then they have this other man has some say over your family. This kid might eventually be like, oh, you're not my father, you're not my this. I need my actual father. Or this kid might just abscond and go away and live with the father in this situation. But I guess you could treat them in a different way. But with fatherless homes, one of the horrible things that happens with this is if the mother is still interacting with low quality male, low level sorts of males, those males come in, and there's a higher chance of these males predating on their kids, their boys and their girls, because these are not their biological ones in general. Like, yes, they are biological people that do abuse their kids and things like this, but the level of abuse, physical abuse, and that other sexual kind of abuse is higher when these are not the kids. I'll try to find somewhere else again with the statistics on that, but the level of it is higher. I think it's easier for people to imagine, like, yes, of course, this is not the person's child, so chances are they would look at this. Somebody who is already in that kind of mentality will often predate and see, like, okay, this person is needy. They'll come to, there's even worse situations where you found single mothers actually pimping out their kids, and just it's horrible stuff that happens here. Okay, so now they have a bunch of census fatherhood statistics. And again, this is a relatively old article, I think, and this is the last part. I'm just going to run through these statistics here. Of course, I'll probably still be giving commentary. Let me not lie. I speak a lot with these things. It's a bit of a little rant kind of information type of thing. Okay, census fatherhood statistics. 64.3 million, estimated number of fathers across the nation. 26.5 million, numbers of fathers who are part of married couple families with their own children under the age of 18. Among these fathers, 22% are raising 3 or more of their own children under 18 years old among married couple family households only. 2% live in the home of a relative or a non-relative. 2.5 million, the number of single fathers, up from 400,000 in 1970. Currently, among single parents living with their children, 18% are men. Among these fathers, 8% are raising 3 or more children of their own under 18 years old. 42% are divorced, 38% have never married, 16% are separated, and 4% are widowed. The percentages of those divorced and never married are not significantly different from one another. And I would say here that widowed, I don't really consider widowed to be a single parent in the same kind of sense. I think when you talk about single mother, single father, I think that should be put towards the people who are either divorced or never married in that situation, and had a kind of breakup separation in that way, because you would assume that if someone is widowed or not and haven't killed their spouse, then they would have been together if they were both alive. So I think that's also why there's widower and widow. There's two different terms that kind of apply to that thing in particular. I think there's different considerations when that happens. Okay, 16% live in the home of a relative or non-relative. 27% have an annual family income of $50,000 or more, and that's why I was talking with the welfare cliff, where this gets to a point where people are stuck depending on social services. They're not able to move around as much. You have certain limitations. Even with the social services, you might be getting it, but your choice in how you get it. I think even the general personal respect of where you're getting that thing from, the kid is also learning and starting to pick up certain things like, okay, my parents aren't necessarily the ones providing for me. It's the state. They become wards of the state, become more reliant on this kind of situation. So in that sense, I can kind of understand why there might be some people in some certain positions who are not necessarily too negative of having a growing group of people who are more dependent on them as an institution. Okay. I think you also look at that. It'd be also interesting to see like the voting patterns of people from fatherless homes versus people from homes with fathers. That would be interesting to see the things they vote for. Okay, 85% among the 30.2 million fathers living with children younger than 18, the percentage who lived with their biological children only, 11% lived with stepchildren, 4% with adopted children, less than 1% with foster children. Now, with the foster children, I think that's the thing where you have kids and they're living in, this kid's been taken away from a tough neighborhood, a tough place, or they're being put up for adoption. I think foster is normally just for a limited amount of time. You're supposed to be there. Their parents are known. They know this is the biological parents of this person, but we're taking them away from some child protective services. We're taking this person away for some time, and then they need somewhere to be housed until they have a better environment to go back to. Either they get adopted by a different family or the different situation happening in the family. Like, I guess if you have a situation where maybe both parents, for some reason, get thrown in jail, or you have a single parent, that single parent gets thrown in jail, you don't necessarily want that kid to be adopted, but something has to be done to take care of the kids, so they'll be put in foster care. And I think in many cases that's also placed with a certain family that's already stable together than that family. Sometimes that family ends up adopting them. Sometimes that kid goes back to the environment they were in before, after it's been rectified, or sometimes they get adopted by someone else. Okay. Recent policies encourage the development of programs designed to improve the economic status of low-income non-resident fathers and the financial and emotional support provided for their children. This brief provides 10 key lessons from several important early responsible fatherhood initiatives that were developed and implemented during the 1900s and early 2000s. Formal evaluations of these earlier fatherhood efforts have been completed, making this an opportune time to step back and assess what has been learned and how to build on the early program's successes and challenges. While the following statistics are formidable, the responsible fatherhood research literature generally supports the claim that a loving and nurturing father improves outcomes for children, families, and communities. And I think that's inarguable. A loving and nurturing ex improves outcomes for children, families, and communities. So that X can be anything. If a loving and nurturing mother, even if she's a single mother, can improve outcomes for children, families, and communities, I think we can agree that a loving and nurturing father, even if it is a single father, will improve outcomes for children, families, and communities. And then now you put those together, you say a loving and nurturing father and mother improves outcomes for children, families, and communities. That's even better. Now, if you even go further and you say a loving and nurturing father and mother that come from loving and nurturing families improve the outcomes for children, families, and communities. And then you even go further than that and you say a loving and nurturing mother and father who come from a loving and nurturing family that live in a loving and nurturing community improves outcomes for children, families, and communities. So I think those are the kind of things that we can kind of understand, that we can kind of accept that these are positive. So just saying, taking one of those things out, even if everything else is loving and nurturing father, loving and nurturing mother, crap community. I'm going to drop the stats. Loving and nurturing father, no loving and nurturing family around that father that he can support on, but then loving and nurturing community will drop the kind of ability. If there's no uncles and aunties and closer people in there, there's still some kind of things. Loving and nurturing family where it's like extended families taking care of this kid, but they don't have the mother and the father. There's a loving and nurturing community. That's still good, but then not having the mother and the father immediately there for that kid, supporting that kid, will actually drop some things for them. So these are the kind of things that I think we can kind of think of in this situation. Okay. So children with involved loving fathers are significantly more likely to do well in school, have healthy self-esteem, exhibit empathy and pro-social behavior, and avoid high-risk behaviors such as drug use, truancy, and criminal activity compared to children who have uninvolved parents. Studies on parent-child relationships and child well-being show that father love is an important factor in predicting the social, emotional, and cognitive development and functioning of children and young adults. 24 million children, 34%, live absent their biological fathers. Nearly 20 million children, 27%, live in single-parent homes. 43% of first marriages dissolve within 15 years. About 60% of divorcing couples have children. And approximately 1 million children each year experience the divorce of their parents. Fathers who live with their children are more likely to have a close, enduring relationship with their children than those who do not. Compared to children born within marriage, children born to cohabitating parents are 3 times more as likely to experience father absence. The children born to unmarried, non cohabitating parents are 4 times as likely to live in a father absent home. Now, I think this is also one of the things I was talking about. Kids kind of tell. I think there is an extra level once you've made that dedication. No matter what you consider marriage, it's a promissory thing. It's a contract to begin with, but it's a contract two people make within themselves. And then, of course, you have the family also there. The family understands and they give some extra support in that situation. If there's a community, the community understands. Okay, these two people are dedicated to themselves, and they will treat them in a certain way. So there's certain things even subconsciously that once you've actually made that promise, it will change some of the relationships that you have within the people that have made the promise, within the main people who are the main family, main relationships, main friends, all those people, and the greater community and society around them. Look at those people in a different kind of way. Yes, there's some things where it's just like better social services if you're actually officially married under whatever state that you live in. I don't think the state has to be even involved in this kind of marriage that I'm talking about here. This is just the actual dedication, saying this is mine. I'm yours, you're mine, and we're to do this together in order to raise us. There's some extra kind of stability and a thing that I think the kid can pick up on with that. Okay. Now, about 40% of children in father-absent homes have not seen their father at all during the past year. 26% of absent fathers live in a different state than their children, and 50% of children living absent their father have never set foot in their father's home. Children who live absent their biological fathers are on average at least 2 to 3 times more likely to be poor, to use drugs, to experience educational, health, emotional, and behavioral problems, to be victims of child abuse, and to engage in criminal behavior than their peers who live with their married, biological, or adoptive parents. And I think that's another key thing again there. You can just have biological is a simple action. Women can give birth in a coma. You can gestate while still in a coma. Men, of course, are a lot more willy-nilly on this type of thing. You drop the sperm off. You can leave your sperm in a sperm bank and never actually see the person who gestates your child, and you technically have reproduced. That doesn't make you a father. Simply gestating and going to term and giving birth to a kid does not make you a mother. You can adopt that kid and be more of a mother, more of a father to them than the biological XXXY that contributed the sperm and the egg in order to have that child be born. That's something that I truly believe. Parents is more based on actions. It's not the biological thing. It's also because of a different type of thing. It goes into like, okay, there's male, female, man, woman, boy, girl, masculine, feminine. Those are different kinds of things. I think when you talk about parent, that now comes towards the man and the woman type of situation. It's more on the behavior that the X has. The biological part is just like, okay, you've given birth, you've contributed the sperm. That's the XX, that's the XY, that's where it kind of behaves. And then now when you go into like the masculine, feminine, now that goes more into like the cultural, what does a father do in Saudi Arabia? What does a father do in Saudi Arabia to teach a kid to better live in Saudi Arabia? What does a mother do in Japan to teach a kid to better live in Japan? Now you get to that point where there's some masculine and feminine roles of the parent, which is the parent is a biological XXXY in this kind of situation, in this kind of environment of an adult age behaving in a certain way. That's what the parent is delineated as. Then the parental behavior, I think now that's when you go into that masculine feminine, that kind of end where the male parent and the masculine parent, the man parent and the woman parent, they have certain behaviors in certain areas and certain locations in order to fit the different environment that they're going to actually, the child is going to most likely be living within. Another last point. From 1995 to 2000, the proportion of children living in single-parent homes slightly declined, while the proportion of children living in two married parents remained stable. Now this statistic, this last one, seems kind of odd. We've seen the proportion of children living in single parents households slightly declined, while the proportion of children living in two married households remained stable. So is this the amount of kids? So let's say you have a society or a system where the conditions lead to about 5% of the parents, let's say it's 100. So 5 out of 100 of the parents are going to have single parents, are going to be single parents. And maybe they have 20% of the children. And you've had this stable system, then maybe for some reasons they start having less kids or something, or maybe some of them get married more. But if some of them get married more, then that means those kids would be going towards the actual percentage of married or people living with two married parents. Or maybe they're talking about single parent home, which is a single parent, and maybe there's more cohabitation, but they're not married in the situation where people think, okay, now I can actually live. And you have this in some situations where someone's like, okay, I'm not going to marry another man, but I'll have a man in the household. And this is also some of the predation comes in this situation. So I'll have a man in the household, but I technically won't be, that kid might not be considered a single parent if it's a cohabitating person that's not necessarily their father. Or I don't know what that statistic actually there means. But we come to the end of this. This was definitely a lot longer than I thought it was going to be at the start, but I shall go back to the start and tell at the start that it's not going to be short. I had this habit where I'd say, okay, it's going to be short because I thought I was just going to read the stats immediately, just direct the stats and just not say anything else. But if I do updates, when I do updates to this one, I'll refer back to this as I was talking about more about the decision and ideas of why I think this fatherlessness issue is a thing, and I'll just read any new statistics or new information or new stories that I have about people dealing with fatherlessness. Maybe it's different cultures, different societies where people are dealing it with there, or maybe steps taken in the United States of America or other places to actually affect and change the situation. Maybe different definitions of it. Like the simple type of thing here. If a kid doesn't grow up without a father, if a boy doesn't grow up with a father, then they kind of, if a boy doesn't grow up with a father, they don't learn what it is to like to be a father. So they are more likely to grow up to an adult, a man and a young man, and not actually know what it would take to be a father. And then when that time comes, when they have the intercourse, they might not be in a position to actually stay there and be responsible enough to be with that woman. A woman who doesn't grow up with a father would not really understand what a good, positive male is like, so they will grant access to one of the most important things that life forms can do in reproduction, and reproduce with somebody who is not somebody that they would be able to dedicate themselves to. Because in the West, specifically in current year, women are the ones who choose who they reproduce with in 99.99% of the times. Even if they get into a situation where they've done something and it's an accidental type of thing, they don't really understand their menstrual cycle and they happen to get pregnant at the time. There's many things, if you've decided not to ask the prophylactic to be used by the male, there's many situations where there's at least 16 forms of things that you can do shortly after that time of being impregnated to cancel that gestation, and you can do those kind of things. So in majority of the cases, if a child is going to be born in the West that has come from some decision of a female adult, a woman deciding, I want to get pregnant, I'm going to gestate this child, and I shall give birth to this child. So they're the ones who decide those things in the vast majority of the cases. And I think part of doing this, part of having a good, responsible father growing up is going to raise the chances that this woman also is going to grow, this girl is going to grow up into a woman that picks and gets the situation where they have that good, responsible male in order to provide that similar environment that they grew up in for their children. And this is something that life forms do. We kind of duplicate the environments that we are familiar with. If we had violence in our childhood environment, chances are we'll duplicate some of that in our adult environment. If we're eating certain kinds of foods in our childhood environment, chances are we'll eat those similar kinds of foods in our childhood environment. If we lived in a certain kind of weather in our childhood environment, chances are we'll seek out that same kind of weather in our adult environment. These are the type of things that do occur and do happen. So it's not too surprising to see that people who grow up without responsible fathers also grow up into irresponsible men, or also pick irresponsible men, because in many of those cases the woman has been bringing irresponsible men around, or talking down, the mother could be talking down to the woman. So there's many situations and things like that, but you just don't have that good example. So we're at the end here, and thank you all very much for listening. And to finish this off, I'm going to go with the Sowell 3, and that's by economist and thinker and all-around great guy, all-around admirable guy to me. I wonder how Thomas Sowell's kids have turned out. He seems like a rather good guy. But then somebody could be good in public, but then as a parent, I'm not besmirching his parenting, but I just don't know about his kids that much. But Thomas Sowell, he has these 3 questions that he asks to people on the left about economics, and it's supposed to be to cancel out many of these ideas and thoughts that they have about economics and things like that. Just to try and figure out, are you really serious about this? And I think being economical, deciding what I'm going to do with my time and things like this, applies in different parts of life. And it's more of a philosophical thing that they do to apply to different things. And the 3 questions are: compared to what, at what cost, and what solid proof do you have? So I'm going to talk about this when it comes to fatherlessness. So the first question is compared to what? Now this goes with men, women, but just in general. But if you don't have a father in the house, compared to what? What are you comparing this to? If you say like, okay, it's okay to just not have a father in there, what are you comparing it to? What kind of environment are you comparing to having the father? Have you had an environment with a good, responsible father that you've seen and you say, okay, that's not something I want. I would rather be in a single mother situation. Then if you don't have the compare to what question at all, if you're a child growing up in this environment and you don't have the compare to what, there's no man to compare to. Okay, this is a woman. This is a strong, responsible single mother that I have in my household. So that's a good thing. But are you comparing that to what? What is the equivalent of a strong, responsible man? Is that something you're also seeing? If you can understand and compare this woman, and you say, by learning what a strong woman is, a strong single mother is, I'll be able to go out and find other women that are actually strong and things like that, then you don't have that man there to compare. So will you be able to also go out there and find it? So I think even on that kind of aspect, you can kind of understand that if you say it's positive to have a ex that is like you in order to compare what you want to do in the future, if you lack that ex that's like you as a boy, you're also going to lack that in the future. There's a chance you're going to lack that. And then for the greater society, I want to ask about people who say, oh, single motherhood is okay. Then say compared to what? This kid has been great. The single mother raised this kid compared to what? Have you seen what this kid might have been if he had both parents in his life? This kid might have been twice as good. Might have done some other things as well. So when people just put that up there, I don't think it's something to say that, yeah, just single motherhood is great because we've had all these successful people. But then compared to what, as we've seen this one with the next cost. At what cost is the next question here. And that's also with the compared to what part, where these are the costs. If you say like, yes, we have some successes of single mothers, but then you also look at all these other situations. You have some successes within fatherlessness. Another way to look at saying like, oh, Kevin Durant, the basketball player, thanked his single mother as he's now probably one of the best basketball players in the world. I don't know, he's probably not going to surpass LeBron as a second. I think it was like Michael Jordan and LeBron. Kevin Durant is an amazing player, but you get to that point and you say, look, when he was thanking his mom and things like you're the superhero. He said something like, you're the winner, something like that. But you get to the position, people cry and they're proud, but then you could also say, this is a fatherless person. So you say, okay, look, this is what fatherlessness happens. Nobody would argue that, oh, fatherlessness is actually what leads to people being as good as basketball players, Kevin Durant. If we had more fatherless kids, then we'd have more Kevin Durants. You wouldn't really say that, but you can also say that, yes, okay, we have more single mothers who are as strong as Kevin Durant's mother, then maybe we would have more Kevin Durants. But we don't really have that. But the cost that we do have is these lists of these negative type of situations that come from that. The cost that we do have of not picking somebody who has actually provided. Now, going to the third question, what solid proof do you have? What are the solid proofs that you have that you are able to be with somebody who you'll be able to reproduce and will be there as a responsible father for your life? Try to get those ideas in your mind before you engage in the actions, the physical intercourse that is been evolved, whose main purpose is reproducing another life. Before you start dating and things like that, whether you talk about the dating, I know dating has changed. We have different kind of relationships. If you don't want to have kids, I'm doing another series with my friend Steven called Marry Him, where he's reading a book written by I'm forgetting her name right now. It's a woman. She was in her late 30s and she was writing towards urban women in their older ages about marrying him, Mr. Good Enough, instead of focusing on the perfect type of things. And that to me is like, if you're focused on this institution of dating and then marriage was in general, primarily marriage was in general developed to have a solid environment in order to reproduce and raise another child. Now, dating itself has now become the amount of choice in the West. If you listen to this, the amount of choice you have to date people is a lot different than it's been historically. To be able to do I really want to date this? Do I really want to marry this person? So a lot of people are taking that marriage out of it and that reproduction out of it. If that's not something you're focused on, then yeah, okay, whatever, you can have marriage for different reasons. But even in that point, in that level, have the solid proof of what you want out of that marriage, out of that dating, out of that relationship, out of the sexual relations, and get that solid proof, that solid answer from that person. So you can compare that to what are the possibilities that you have, what are the abilities you have to compare to, at what cost, what are the things you can gain and lose time-wise, personal-wise, ability-wise, by not actually having solid proof to understand these are the kind of people that you should be with. So that's it for the Sowell 3. On the screen, there should be some merchandise, also links below to merchandise store. There would be a speed drawing going on. I might have gone with the hands up, don't hit thing since this is dealing with kids a bit, and that is a series that I'm more focusing on peaceful parenting and just better environment for the children, because the children are the most important thing. Wu-Tang is with children. Speed is with children. Hands up, don't hit is for the children. So just about different positive type of things we can increase for the outcomes of children and the societies that we live in and the families that we're part of. And I think with that, there's merchandise for Hands Up Don't Hit, there's merchandise for the Sowell 3, there's other kind of merchandise as well. There's other places you can support this channel. There should be a link, which is Anu Links at carbon33.com. You can go there and you'll find links to all my different type of things. If you want to support the store, there's different ways you can donate. With these kind of things, I just enjoy this information. You can also send me emails with information about the fatherlessness type of thing. Then I might actually read and do follow-ups in this. Is also relation to a blog where I have a lot of other posts where you'll find the links to some of the things that I've talked about in this actual post right here. So that's it for now. Like, share, subscribe. I hope you've learned something from these things. If this is new information to you, I don't know how much it's spoken about where you've lived and where you are at. Maybe there might be a benefit of me to just actually go back in and reread these just the statistics, and I'll consider just doing this. I direct read through all the statistics without any actual commentary. So if somebody wants to share just plainly the statistics to somebody else, that might be helpful. Let me know in the comment section. Maybe I would have done that by the time you actually listen to this. Yeah, I mean, that's something, again, with the time, you donate and things like that, then that'll give me more time to do this. I'll try to find some time within the other things that I'm doing to just have like something where it's just like just the information, then have a separate one with the commentary and things like that go in these longer rants, because some people might not want the rants, might just want the information themselves. But anyway, till next time, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, and everything else in between, goodbye.